Hey everyone, it's Max here, and this is my new original story on the channel.
There is a photograph in the National Archives that has been reproduced in more history books than almost any other image in American education history. It shows 2 rows of Native American children. On the left side of the image, they are wearing traditional dress, their hair is long, their posture is the posture of people who know who they are. On the right side of the same image, taken months later, the same children are in school uniforms, haircut, expressions controlled. The school's name is visible on the building behind them. The photograph is from the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania. It was taken as a deliberate promotional image. The school's administrators were proud of what the before and after showed. The photograph documented transformation. That was the point. The school's founder, Richard Henry Pratt, described his program's purpose in 1879 in a speech that has been quoted in every history of American Indian policy since. A great general has said that the only good Indian is a dead Indian. I agree with the sentiment, but only in this, that all the Indian there is in the race should be dead. Kill the Indian in him and save the man. Pratt's speech is in the historical record. The photograph is in the National Archives under Record Group 75, the records of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Both have been available to researchers for decades. The photograph has become iconic. The policy it illustrated has taken much longer to be formally acknowledged. In May 2022, the United States Department of the Interior released the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative Investigative Report. The report is 106 pages long. It was the first systematic federal accounting of the boarding school system, the number of schools, the number of children, the geographic scope, and the known deaths. The report identified 408 federal Indian boarding schools that operated across 37 states between 1819 and 1969. It documented at least 53 schools with marked burial sites. It acknowledged that the true number of burial sites is likely higher because record-keeping was inconsistent and because some deaths were not reported to families at all. The report is a public document. It was published by the Department of the Interior on May 11, 2022. Any American can read it. It is the federal government formally acknowledging, for the first time, in a comprehensive and official way, what the boarding school system was and what it did. To understand what the report is acknowledging, you need to understand what the system was. The Federal Indian Boarding School program grew out of legislation and policy developed between 1819 and 1879. The Civilization Fund Act of 1819 provided federal money to religious organizations running schools for Native Americans. The Indian Appropriations Acts of the 1870s expanded federal funding and federal control. Richard Henry Pratt's founding of Carlisle in 1879 provided the model that the Bureau of Indian Affairs would replicate across 37 states over the following decades. The core policy was removal. Children were taken from their families, in some cases voluntarily, in many cases under pressure, in some cases by force. They were transported hundreds of miles to schools where they were forbidden to speak their languages, forbidden to practice their religions, given English names to replace their own, dressed in uniforms, and subjected to a curriculum designed to make them into something the federal government considered useful: farmhands, domestic servants, manual laborers. The records of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, which are in the National Archives under Record Group 75, are among the most complete for any school in the system. The Carlisle records include student case files, individual folders for each student containing their enrollment information, their progress reports, their correspondence with home, and in cases where students died at the school, their death records and the records of what was done with their remains. The Carlisle records document 186 children who died at the school. Some are buried in the Carlisle Cemetery. Some were buried elsewhere. The Army has been conducting exhumations and repatriations of remains from the Carlisle Cemetery since 2017. We covered that story in an earlier video, but Carlisle was one school. The 2022 federal report identified 407 others. Now I want to tell you about Zitkala-Sa, because Zitkala-Sa is the person who wrote down what it felt like from inside, and what she wrote is in an archive, and what the archive contains is more specific than any history book summary can convey. Zitkala-Sa was born on the Yankton Sioux Reservation in South Dakota in 1876. Her name at birth was Gertrude Simmons. She was 8 years old when Quaker missionaries came to her reservation and recruited children for the Whites Manual Labor Institute in Wabash, Indiana. The missionaries described the school as a place of adventure, of fruit and learning. Her mother was reluctant. Zitkala-Sa wanted to go. She was 8 years old. She did not fully understand what going would mean. She arrived at the school in 1884. In 1900, she published a series of autobiographical essays in the Atlantic Monthly describing what happened. The essays are not second-hand history. They are first-person testimony from someone who was there. The Smithsonian Institution holds her papers, including drafts of the essays and correspondence with her editors. I want to quote what she wrote about the day they cut her hair, because the quote is in the record and it captures something that aggregate numbers cannot. She wrote that when she understood what was coming, that they were going to cut her hair, she crawled under a bed and hid. She could hear them looking for her. They found her. They pulled her out. They tied her to a chair. They cut her hair. She wrote, "I cried aloud, shaking my head all the while until I felt the cold blades of the scissors against my neck and heard them gnaw off one of my thick braids. Then I lost my spirit." In Yankton Sioux tradition, hair was cut only in mourning. Having her hair cut did not mean what it would mean to the school administrators who did it. It meant what it meant in the culture she came from, and what it meant in that culture was grief. The school administrators did not ask what it meant. They had a policy. They implemented the policy. They documented the policy in administrative records that are now at the Indiana State Library and in Bureau of Indian Affairs correspondence files at the National Archives under Record Group 75. Zitkala-Sa's essays documented what the policy felt like when it was implemented on a specific child in a specific moment. Both sets of records have been in their respective archives for over a century. In the National Archives in Washington, there are boxes, thousands of them. They are in the records of the Bureau of Indian Affairs under Record Group 75. They contain the administrative documentation of the federal Indian boarding school system, the enrollment registers, the student case files, the correspondence between school superintendents and bureau officials, the medical records, the disciplinary records, the death records. The death records are the category that the 2022 federal report treated with the most urgency. The report found that children died at the schools from tuberculosis, trachoma, influenza, and other diseases that spread rapidly in overcrowded dormitories with inadequate medical care. The report found that some deaths were preventable, that schools had been warned about disease conditions and had not acted. The report found that in many cases, families were not notified when their children died. Some children were buried at school cemeteries without their families knowing where they were buried or even that they had died. The death records in Record Group 75 document these deaths by name. They show the child's name, their age, their tribal affiliation, the cause of death as recorded by the school, and in many cases what was done with their remains. These records have been available to researchers for decades. The 2022 federal report was the first time the government systematically cross-referenced those records to identify all known burial sites. I want to tell you about the records that document what happened to children who ran away, because the runaway records are the category that has received the least attention and that I find most specific. The Bureau of Indian Affairs records include what are called desertion reports, official documentation of children who ran away from the schools. These reports typically include the child's name, their age, the date they left, the direction they were believed to have gone, and whether they were recovered. In some cases, the reports include subsequent information. The child was found and returned to the school. In some cases, the subsequent entry is, the child was found dead. In some cases, there is no subsequent entry at all. The child ran away and was never found, and the record simply ends. The desertion reports are in Record Group 75 at the National Archives. They are not widely known. They are not among the records that have been digitized. They require in-person research. But they exist, and they document, in official federal language, the specific experience of children who found the schools intolerable enough to attempt escape, often hundreds of miles from home, in terrain they did not know, in winter, without adequate clothing. The 2022 federal report noted that some deaths may be attributable to children who ran away and died. The desertion reports in Record Group 75 are the documentation of those attempts. Now, I want to tell you about the second phase of the federal investigation, because the Department of the Interior published a Phase 2 report in 2024 that went further than the 2022 report in documenting the school system's use of child labor. And the Phase 2 report contains a finding that connects the boarding school system to economic history in a way the 2022 report did not fully address. The Phase 2 report found that boarding school students were routinely used as unpaid or underpaid labor, not as part of a vocational training program, but as a revenue source for the schools. Students worked in school farms, laundries, and kitchens. The work they performed subsidized the school's operating costs. The Bureau of Indian Affairs records document the labor assignments and, in some cases, the commercial transactions through which the schools sold goods and services produced by student labor. This is documented. The school farm records, the laundry records, the commercial sale records are in Record Group 75. The Phase 2 report cited them specifically. Children who had been taken from their families were then used as unpaid labor to subsidize the operation of the institutions that had taken them. The Phase 2 report is a public document. It was published by the Department of the Interior in 2024. It is available through the Interior Department's website. The underlying records are in the National Archives. Now I want to tell you how to find your family in the school records, because this is the actionable information that transforms history into something personal. The National Archives catalog is searchable online. Go to catalog.archives.gov. In the search bar, type your ancestor's name in the words Indian School or Bureau of Indian Affairs. If your ancestor attended a federal boarding school, their name may appear in an enrollment register or student case file. For Carlisle specifically, the school with the most complete records, the student case files have been partially digitized and are searchable through the National Archives catalog. Thousands of individual student files are available online, each containing the student's enrollment card, photographs in some cases, and records of their time at the school. For other schools, the enrollment registers are typically not digitized and require in-person research or a records request to the National Archives. The finding aid for Record Group 75 describes which school's records are in the collection and what types of documents each school's records contain. The 37 states where schools operated include Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, Washington, and Wisconsin. If your family has Native American ancestry from any of these states, the school records may contain a relative's name. The enrollment registers document when each child arrived, how old they were, and what tribe they came from. The case files document what happened to them while they were there. The photograph in the National Archives, the before and after that Pratt used to promote his program, documents two moments in the life of the same children. The child on the left is who they were. The child on the right is who the school tried to make them. The records in the 408 files for 408 schools document, child by child, what that transformation cost. The Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative Investigative Report, May 2022, and the Phase 2 Report, 2024, are public documents published by the United States Department of the Interior. Search Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative to find them. The Bureau of Indian Affairs records, including student case files, enrollment registers, desertion reports, and death records for all 408 schools, are in the National Archives under Record Group 75. The finding aid is available through the National Archives catalog at catalog.archives.gov. The Carlisle Indian Industrial School student files are among the most complete and have been partially digitized. Zitkala-Sa's autobiographical essays were published in the Atlantic Monthly in 1900. They have been widely reprinted. Her papers, including drafts and correspondence, are at the Smithsonian Institution. The Indiana State Library holds records from the White's Manual Labor Institute, the school Zitkala-Sa attended. If your family has Native American ancestry, search your ancestor's name at the National Archives catalog. Type their name and Indian School or Bureau of Indian Affairs. Their enrollment record may be there. Subscribe. Because next week, we open another file.